Now, building new domain controllers can be a fun activity until, well, you've probably done it your 25th or 35th time, but actually upgrading domain controllers, and more specifically upgrading domains, becomes much more of a project. When we're talking about upgrading domain controllers and upgrading domains, we think of this as a project because the move from one operating system to another does more than just change the OS that exists on that domain controller itself. With each new version of the operating system come new features that are baked into Active Directory, as well as a slightly different Active Directory database itself that's going to require some updating as well. And so the process not only to upgrade a domain controller, but really a domain or even a forest typically happens in 5 different steps. This goes just a little bit further than what I think is going to be required for the exam itself, but I think it's valid for you to understand what these 5 steps are because it's likely that you may be taking this exam to prepare yourself for upgrading your skills and your domain to a newer version of the operating system. The first step in the process is obviously just to get healthy. Making sure that you have a healthy Active Directory with great replication between machines and no major error messages in any of your domain controller logs is always the best step towards making sure that the garbage you get out is at least as good as the garbage that you had going in. In the 412 content, when we start getting into that exam, I'll talk more about some of the tools you can use to make sure that your domain is healthy before you make that jump. But for now, just keep it in the back of your mind that there are tools and there are different kinds of command line ways in which you can test and verify whether or not the replication is working and whether or not your Active Directory database is going to survive that upgrade to the new operating system. And the second step in upgrading a domain controller or a domain has to do with extending the schema. Now, as I said, each different version of the operating system tends to come with a slightly different Active Directory database. This does not have to do with the data in the database, but the structure of the database. And so one process you'll need to go through is to actually extend the schema for your forest before you begin ever adding any of the new domain controllers of that newer version into your Active Directory infrastructure. Now, that command that we're looking for in order to extend the schema is called adprep. And the adprep command is one that's best found on the installation media for Windows Server 2012 R2. Let me get back here to our machine DC, and I've brought up a command prompt here, an elevated command prompt, so that we can take a look at the contents of the attached DVD media. Here on the D drive, if I take a look, there's all the stuff that exists on that Windows 2012 R2 DVD media. And if I go into the support adprep folder, it's in this folder where I'll find the adprep command right up here at the very top. This adprep.exe command is what goes through the process of extending the schema, of making changes to the Active Directory database to prepare it for all these new features and functions that come with this new version of the operating system. Now, adprep actually executes a long list of what are these LDF files that you can see here, all the way here from 10 or so down to looks like 69 or so. And what's curious about these LDF files is that they're actually human readable. If I go here to the D drive and open it up, and then go to support and then adprep, I can take a look at any of these LDF files to see more or less what they look like. Here under Notepad, you can see that they correspond with the exact text-based changes that are going to happen here to the Active Directory database. And without going into detail as to what it is that we're looking at, just recognize that these are the instructions that the schema extension uses in order to make those changes from old version to new. Now, there are actually a couple of different parameters that are associated with adprep that I would at least be aware of. So let me clear the screen here and show you that if I do the /?, there are right up here the forest prep, domain prep, and RODC prep parameters that are of most importance here. There's also a GP prep, which you can do that consolidates here with a domain prep. The forest prep command typically happens first, and it is a schema extension that deals with forest-wide information. The domain prep then needs to happen once in each domain of that forest. You run that, and it goes through all the domain-wide changes for the different domains that exist in that forest. And then lastly, down here, you can choose RODC prep optionally if you plan on installing any RODCs into this forest. These are read-only domain controllers that are used for special circumstances. If you don't have any, then you don't have to run this third parameter down here. So these commands here are what are used in order to execute all the schema extensions that are necessary to allow you then to go about upgrading your domain controllers to the new operating system. So you can't start upgrading your DCs until you get your schema extended. You'll then need to go through the process of upgrading all the domain controllers, every single domain controller in the forest and/or domain, occasionally migrating around your FSMO roles to ensure that they're always online, before you actually get to the final step in the process, which is to go about then taking advantage of all the new features that you get by upgrading your domain or forest functional level to the new version. Now, the reason why I call this a project is because you don't actually get any of the benefits of the new domain and forest functional level until you've gone through every step in this process, including upgrading the operating system of every single domain controller. Now, this last step here, raising the domain and forest functional level, is something that you'll find here in the graphical user interface. If I go up here under Tools and take a look at Active Directory Domains and Trusts, out of all the different tools that are associated with Active Directory, users and computers, sites and services, it's actually domains and trusts that you find yourself inside the least. But it is here where, if I take a look at domains and trusts, I can take a look at raising, number one, the forest functional level from one version to another. Now, I'm already at the most recent version of the forest functional level, which is Server 2012 R2. So there are no options here for me to make any changes. However, if I were not, and I'd already gone through the AD prep activities, well, then I'd see this as an option for me to raise that forest functional level. I can do the same thing over here with each individual domain in the forest by clicking here and choosing to raise the domain functional level as well. Most important thing you have to know with this is that the raising of a domain or forest functional level is a one-directional activity. You can only go in one direction, you can never go back. But the good news is that once you've done it, you can now begin to take advantage of the new features that you get in Active Directory out of this new operating system version.